Suella Braverman may have been thrown out of the cabinet, but her legacy will be in some ways determined later this week when the ruling on the Rwandan deportation policy is finalised. Nobody knows which way it is going to go. But it occurred to me some time ago that we have sort of glossed over, apart from the reports that I've shared with you about refugees in Rwanda protesting against their food rations just a few short years ago and being shot dead for their troubles. The question of how suitable a destination for these people Rwanda might be hasn't really been asked enough. It's the notion of we've talked a lot about deportation and not that much about Rwanda, which is odd, really, when you think about it, because the history of genocide in Rwanda was quite well documented in the West. And for people who hadn't been fully aware of it, the Hollywood film Hotel Rwanda was an astonishing introduction to some of the horrors that were visited upon that country during that period. And it features, of course, the story of Paul Rusesabagina, who was the character played by Don Cheadle in the movie. Now, I met Paul's daughter last year at the Magnitsky Awards, which are unfolding on Thursday night this year as well. And I'm delighted to say that not only is she with me now, but she's also going to pick up an award on Thursday, along with her sister Anais, for young human rights activist. And Corinne, I want to know a little bit about Rwanda, really, and I'm very grateful to you for being here today. Your dad, I mean, this isn't ancient history, is it? Because he was most recently arrested in 2020, essentially kidnapped. And last time we met, this time last year, you were still advocating for his release. He is now free. He's back in Texas, I think.
Yes, thank you for having me, James. Yes, my father has now been freed, but he spent 2.5 years wrongfully detained in prison in Rwanda, where he was being tortured, was subjected to a sham trial, and deprived of all his human rights. Thankfully, after international pressure and the support of many human rights organizations and governments around the world, the dictator of Rwanda was forced to let him go.
We speak of Paul Kagame, who remains in post. So what was your sort of initial reaction when you heard that a government such as the UK's government was doing business with Kagame's regime in this way?
I was absolutely shocked. Rwanda is a dictatorship. There is one man in power who has been in power for almost 30 years and plans to be in power for another 10 years. He rules with an iron fist. There are no freedoms in Rwanda. And what happened to my father, his kidnapping across international border and sham trial and torture, is an example of the type of country that is ruled by this government, by the government of Rwanda.
Tell us a little bit more about what your dad did when he risked his own life to save more than 1,000 refugees. Tell us how he did that and what he was rescuing them from.
Yes, so in 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda. We have two major ethnic groups in Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis. And during the genocide, there was an attempt at extermination of the Tutsi ethnicity. My father at the time was a hotel manager in the center of Kigali. And he opened the doors for everyone who could make it to the front door of the hotel and gave them shelter. He protected them from the killers who were waiting outside. He risked his own life to protect these individuals. And after 76 days, everyone was safely evacuated to refugee camps outside of Kigali, and not a single person under his protection was killed.
An extraordinary achievement. And had he not done it, they would not be here today.
Yes, exactly. And in addition to that, both my biological parents in the genocide were killed, and my sister and I's biological parents. And in addition to saving over 1,200 lives, he saved my sister and I and adopted us and raised us as his own daughters. So he truly is a remarkable man and a courageous man.
And yet it is an extraordinary sort of step up, isn't it? Have you spoken to him about what prompted him to do this, to risk his own life, most obviously?
Mm-hmm. He understood that it was important to take a stand, that we were ordinary people, and as ordinary people, we must make it stand up to make a difference. We must stand up for humanity, for human dignity. And at the time, people were being killed for their ethnicity, and he refused to allow this to happen under his watch and decided to risk his own lives to protect others.
And what was Paul Kagame doing during this period?
At the time, Kagame was part of the army that came into Kigali with the attempt of taking power. And actually, after the genocide, when Paul Kagame heard of my father's role in the genocide, he did not like it that people were talking about this other man who had saved lives in the hotel. And so he sought to kill him. And that's what prompted our family to leave Rwanda and as refugees to seek asylum outside of the country.
Successfully?
Yes.
Albeit that in 2020, when he was travelling internationally, the Rwandan authorities tracked him down or got hold of him.
Yes, in 2020, so after the movie Hotel Rwanda came out, my father gained an international platform, and he used that platform, the platform he acquired through the movie, to call attention from the world to the abuses of human rights being perpetrated by the government of Rwanda. And he spoke loudly on every platform he could, which is why the government of Rwanda kidnapped him in order to silence him, to stop him from talking about the abuses being perpetrated by the regime.
And all of which leads us back to the British government's current plans to deport asylum seekers and refugees back to the country from which your father helped over 1,000 refugees escape. Just stringing those words together in the same sentence speaks of a madness almost.
Yes, I mean, even last year, the UNHCR reported that over 8,000 people, Rwandans, fled Rwanda to seek asylum in other countries because of the dictatorship, because of the abuses being perpetrated by the regime. And the decision to send vulnerable people, refugees here in the United Kingdom, to a country that the United Kingdom knows very well is a dictatorship abusing the rights of its own people is absolutely unconscionable.
Well, we will find out later this week what the latest chapter in that very sad story is. What do you do these days, Corinne? Because I know you worked in investment at one point, but you gave that up to pressure the Rwandan government into releasing him. Do you now dedicate yourself to this sort of work, I think? Yes.
What happened to my father, the torture he was inflicted with and the suffering that he was inflicted with was opened my eyes to the suffering of many other Rwandans in the country and across the world, as well as the people in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who are currently victim of a war that is being financed by the government of Rwanda. And we all have a voice. We all, with my voice, we all have a responsibility to speak out on behalf of the people who are being silenced, who are being oppressed. And with everything I've learned and all the people I've met throughout the past 2.5 years advocating for my father, I've taken on the responsibility along with the rest of my family to continue to shed a light on these abuses.
Well, thank you for that. And I look forward to being part of the audience that will honour you and your sister Anais at the Magnitsky Awards on Thursday night. How fearful are you and your sister and your dad still? Because the circumstances in which your dad was captured, is the word I would use, or kidnapped, were remarkable. The plane he was on, he thought was heading to Burundi. But obviously deals had been done and, money perhaps had changed hands. And instead he was taken back to Rwanda where he was arrested. So is there a threat? And I know you feel or that you've been illegally surveilled at times in your life as well. Does the family still represent? Are you still a thorn in the side of Kagame?
Yes, because Kagame and the government of Rwanda goes after anybody who dares to speak out against the regime, anybody who brings attention to the abuses of this government. And while I was advocating for my father, I was physically followed by agents of the government of Rwanda and harassed, whether on social media or through illegal surveillance of a spyware in my phone. I don't feel safe, but I also know that when we stop speaking, this is when they take the opportunity to hurt us. And so it's important to continue to speak out, to be loud and call for accountability, call for the world to put sanctions like the Magnitsky sanctions, targeted sanctions, which can be placed on individuals who are responsible for abuse of human rights. I don't feel safe, but I think it's important to continue to speak.
And finally, what would you say to British politicians who are, I use the language that one of our politicians used herself, they are dreaming of the day that they see a plane full of refugees flying to Rwanda, flying to Kigali?
I would ask them to have some humanity and to not send vulnerable people and vulnerable refugees to a dictatorship.
Corinne Kanimba, thank you so much for your time today. And as I say, I'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you very much, James.